From the studio that brought you the Batman trilogy. And then the real Batman trilogy. And then 2 shitty Batman adjacent movies comes. That's right, another fucking Batman movie. DC isn't giving up on this cash cow anytime soon. But this one's different. This one is riddled with questions.
When is this movie even coming out?
Why wear a mask if it doesn't cover your fucking mouth?
But the most important question remains unanswered.
Is he still contagious?
This spring/summer/fall, get ready for a COVID test. Batman with muscle cars. Oh, is it really? My bad. The Batman. Just the Batman.
And we are back. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. We got plenty more where that came from. We are moving right into our deep dive section, and nothing brings back the nostalgia like hearing somebody talk about those good old N64 days, am I right? Where you could gather around the couch, blow off your Smash Bros. Cartridge, and go at it for hours. But despite most of those moments dying off as online gaming was brought to the mainstream in the mid-2000s, regardless, Nintendo, just like Jake's headband, has remained supreme. Nintendo sold 6.92 million units in the U.S. alone in 2020, which surpasses in 11 months the total number of systems sold in 2019 by over 426,000. This includes the combined sales of the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Switch Lite systems, which hit over 1.35 million units in the U.S. in the month of November alone. With sales numbers so big, the Nintendo Switch achieved another milestone as the best-selling video game console in the U.S. for a record 24 consecutive months. But Nintendo is no stranger to being on the top. The SNES held the record for the most console sales in history all the way through 2006. But when Nintendo the NES held the record for the most console sales in history all the way up until 2006 when the Nintendo released the Wii. And they're also notable giants of handheld gaming. When the DS debuted, it blew all other handhelds out of the water and continues to do so. It sold 125 million units, and in 2014 outsold iPhones and Game Boys by huge margins.
Wow.
2021 is going to be a huge year for Nintendo, with 4 of its major titles having anniversaries. We mentioned earlier Pokemon, but additionally The Legend of Zelda and Metroid are turning 35, and Donkey Kong is turning 40. This is certainly set to be an epic year for Nintendo fans, new and old alike. And it's decades upon decades of success that got them to this point. So what are the keys to their success? What makes Nintendo unique, guys? Let's start with you, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, besides, well, the biggest one is amazing characters. I think they so they are able to ride the nostalgia wave like a Disney or like, a lot of these, current companies that are riding nostalgia waves because they established rememberable characters that are nostalgia worthy. And so, the fact that they can come out with a new Mario game every 2 to 3 years and we buy it, it says something pretty massive for the character considering of how long he's been around. The fact that Donkey Kong games are still selling 40 years later is a true testament to like the character development of Donkey Kong and how much people really like the character of Donkey Kong alone, and Zelda too. 35 years is nothing to turn your nose up at either. That's a long time for us. And the Breath of the Wild, which came out like 3-4 years ago, is still one of the best games of the last like almost 10 years. It feels like so. It's it's amazing just what they were able to do with characters back in the day that have continued to stand the test of time, and they've continued to pump more into these characters. They've continued to do that, but not just on the character level. You wrote here the Willy Wonka video games.
That's how I've always described Nintendo as the Willy Wonka of video games, because they're always trying something new. They're always trying something different. Yes, they have their things that work, but they continually, just change things up. They were the first ones.
Hardware-wise, they're
Right.
crazy. Yeah.
When they're the first ones to bring in the Wii and the motion control there. They were the first ones to really weave that in organically into the system. That's still a part of the Switch. It's not a big part of the Switch, but it's still a functional part of the Switch.
Yeah.
But the Switch just mashed up. We want to have a handheld console, a console, and a motion capturing console all in one.
Yeah.
Put it all together in the Switch. What about you?
Exactly.
What do you think makes Nintendo great, Kev?
Yeah, I think it's just their sort of obsessive need to always innovate, right? Like they're always trying to push the envelope. They're always like they don't stay in a box, and I think and they're not afraid to fail, right? Like they'll have hits like the N64, and then they'll have the Virtual Boy, and then they'll have the GameCube, which is middle and road underrated. Then they'll have the Wii, and then Wii U, and then the Switch, right? Like they're not afraid to change what works, but at the same time, they keep what works, i.e. Mario, Zelda, they're iconic characters, and they just move them on these new innovations that they try to continuously create every 6 to 8 years now, right? And I think that's one thing that's always special about Nintendo is that you're always going to get something different while also having something that's familiar. They have this weird balance, and I think that's something that they've sort of mastered in a way.
Yeah, they really have. They've balanced still being able to keep dedicated fans in, but they also bring new fans in every year as well. One of the things I was going to talk about is one of the big keys to their success is their first party games. First party games have always been a cornerstone of Nintendo's success. Nintendo characters, their worlds, their storylines. I mean, like the world of Hyrule, the Mushroom Kingdom, the whole Star Fox, the Lilat system, all these different universes. Nintendo has brought some of the video games' hugest icons. Mario just as one of them, but Star Fox, Donkey Kong, Pikachu, huge icons. Yoshi, Samus. You can go for days. Hell, they've hit so many iconic series that they created their own series where their iconic characters fight each other, and that's in itself become an iconic series of the franchise.
Exactly.
Right,
Oh my gosh, it's like iconic franchiseception.
And it hasn't been replicated either. Like you think other like Sony or Microsoft be able to do something similar?
No.
They just can't. Like
Sony tried.
I don't even think they've even. Yeah, Sony tried, and it wasn't even.
Sony has
close.
tried. They
tried with the fighting game that brought like all of their people together and
And they've got some good characters. It just doesn't
Smash.
work.
There is a kind of a brand loyalty with exclusive content and first party games, and it does shape how kind of a gamer you are. I mean, if I find that a lot of Xbox players are going to be the people that do cling to the big first person shooter type games. Why? Because one of the biggest exclusive franchises out there is Halo.
Yeah.
And that brings people to the game. They want to buy an Xbox and put their money into it because they love the Halo franchise itself. And because of that, they're more likely to be a first person shooter gamer. In the same way, Nintendo has done that with its first party games. So how has Nintendo's first party games shaped the video game industry? Kev, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think you can even like Wii Sports, right? Like, so when they just introduced the Wii, they're like, okay, we're going to start using motion technology for gaming,
Right.
And they're saying, okay, well, how can we expand that outside of people who are just habitual video game players? Well, what if we try to rope in casual gamers with ideas like things that they're familiar with, like bowling or baseball or tennis, or even just like regular calisthenic fitness activities. So that's kind of where you see the Wii come into play. And again, that's one way they're using first party to sort of using something familiar with something that is also new and innovative. And then okay, now how can we use this with Mario, right? Like how can we use this technology to make Mario not archaic? And they're not afraid to keep what they have, their foundation solid, right? They know what their foundation is. It's their characters. And then it's like, okay, well, how can we make these characters relevant, or how can we expand and do something different, right? Like Mario Sunshine, it's an underrated game, but it's something. It's a good example of them wanting to try something new, right? They went from 3D Mario to, okay, now it's still 3D, but we have to add an attachment to him. We have to do something different that he hasn't really done before.
Yeah,
and they do that constantly with all their characters.
Yeah, they really do. I mean, they've built a big part. I feel like they've done a lot for gaming. I mean, one of the first ones that I found out today when I was doing a little bit of research talking about this was Donkey Kong invented the concept of jumping in a video game. In 1981, Donkey Kong introduced the world to Mario, a jumping plumber who was desperately trying to jumping over hurdles and climbing ladders to defeat the mighty Donkey Kong. This was the first time any video game character had actually shown a character jumping. So the simple, act of a graphical jump actually played into a whole bunch of different games.
And then years later, it introduced bongos to video.
Exactly. It's just one example of how they set the standard for the world of gaming, though. Jake, do you have any examples of how first-party games have shaped it's particularly Nintendo?
Well,
first-party games have shaped the video game industry.
If Nintendo's characters have pushed Microsoft and Sony and all these other, gaming, corporations to essentially they push their own iconic characters, right? To try to make a Master Chief, to try to make a Kratos, right? Yeah. And so without Mario, you don't have those guys. And so I think that's one of the biggest ways that Nintendo's kind of like first-party games have changed gaming in general, because they kind of set a tone, and it's just like, as long as they're still out here innovating, making new characters, exploring new things with old characters, which I think is what you're kind of alluding to earlier. Like Mario, for a long time, was just Mario. Then he got Luigi. Then he got, to where he could have a little squirrel hat and fly. And then, like more and more things started getting added to him, and to where nowadays, like Cappy is just a natural extension of Mario in a video game, to where you're not feeling like out of place because you have this talking cap on your head and you've never had that before. And you're not feeling out of place while you're stomping around as a T-Rex, because you're just like that you possessed his body, right? And it's it's just one of those where like Nintendo's always kind of like pushed these innovations. They've changed their characters up. They've pushed what their characters can do, and that's pushed other gaming corporations like Microsoft, Sega, for as long as they were able to compete, and Sony and all these guys. They pushed them really to kind of like create.
Sega said, "Don't if you can't beat them, join them."
Exactly. Sega was like, "Yo, we're tired of competing. Do y'all want Sonic?" And they were like, "We'll fucking take Sonic." And so like,
here's them at the Olympics.
Yeah, exactly. But I definitely think like, I don't want to see what gaming would be like without Nintendo, because I don't know what it would be like.
It literally wouldn't exist. Like, there's a documentary on Netflix. And I remember we talked about this when I was in college, where it's like Nintendo literally saved video games. Like, they had died after Atari, and then Nintendo brought them back from the dead.
For real.
F's for Dreamcast. Yeah.
F's in chat for Dreamcast.
F's for Dreamcast. What an iconic console that just was way ahead of its time. The world was not ready. Somebody came back in time and gave us the Dreamcast, and everybody was like, "No, man, I don't like it."
It was in a weird place. It was ahead of its time, but behind its time at the same time. It's weird.
I feel like the
How do you even do that?
The only thing I really remember about Dreamcast is that one level in Sonic while the orcas are driving behind you. Like that's it.
Man.
I remember fucking Crazy Taxi. Hours of Crazy Taxi. That's
Power Stone, your damn little memory card, which was also like a Tamagotchi. Like that shit was so lit.
That was, dude. You could, oh man. Deep dive on Dreamcast later.
We're talking about Nintendo, not their competition.
Yeah, we gotta keep
former competition.
I think a couple of other things that we could talk about when we were talking about how Nintendo's first party games shaped the video game industry. The concept of party games in general.
Yeah.
They brought Mario Party into the mix.
Mario
Kart into the mix. Smash Brothers, games that really like the biggest best couch co-op games out there. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think that they were the ones that kind of designed what that format looks like, and there's not really been anybody that's been able to compete with that since. I can't think of very many party games on PlayStation. I can't think of very many party games on Xbox.
It's almost as if they say, we'll leave that to Nintendo. Like
Exactly.
it's almost as if they know Nintendo's they've done it great, and they're just like, we'll just leave that in Nintendo, like
Which is crazy because like Nintendo literally has essentially no competition at this point. It's just themselves.
The fact they still innovate on it just goes to show what a creative company they are.
Yeah. Well, I think and that's kind of what allows them to do so, right? Like they don't have to necessarily mail it in. I don't think they will. Like Nintendo's not built like that. And they don't hire like that. So I think like they can because they don't have competition, it allows them to be very innovative where they can take these risks and swing for the fences. Yeah. And if it doesn't work, they're like, well, shit, we'll just try next generation.
Yeah,
right.
No, for real. And they do have a very brush it off mentality, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yep. They've also capitalized on nostalgia better than any other company that I've ever seen before. I mean, they can they can rewrap something and give it to you, and we will give them money hand over foot for it. I mean,
bitch about Pokemon, I'm here for it.
Right? Right? I mean, the gimmicks that they add to it, like I'm looking forward to. We talk about the 25th anniversary. We know we can look forward this year to most likely seeing a Pokemon game come out, and all signs point to Gen 4 remakes, and everybody wants Gen 4 remakes. Anytime that there is a Gen 4 Pokemon in a Pokemon announcement, the comments just go wild with hashtag Gen 4 remakes confirmed. Everybody wants to see it. Everybody wants it. I want it. And we're likely to see it. And there's likely either going to be a new mechanic added in there, or we're going to be revisiting an old generation with this new mechanic we got from Gen 8, Dynamaxing, and adding it to the mix. And that is just a complete rewrap of their old content. And again, people are going nuts over it. I am going nuts over it, thirsting
Pokemon
for
Texas.
it. It's Pokemon, like that's I love that. And and I mean, people are realizing it even more so. You look at Pokemon cards. I mean, that's not necessarily in the video game. It's still in the video game part. It's connected to it. But Pokemon cards have been selling for thousands and thousands of dollars. And there's big resurgence in these old Pokemon cards because people are stuck at home. They finally cracked open their binder. Don't you pull it out, Kev.
He's got binders full of women. I mean, Pokemon cards.
They started... They started, going through and equating those values and finding out, how much these things are worth. And the reason those things are worth that much is because people have nostalgia. Because if people have put a monetary value on that feeling that you got when you were in kindergarten and someone traded you for that shiny holographic Charizard and you got to have one in your hands for a second there, and you were like, oh my gosh, this is the one. So they have really, really capitalized on that. And I think that their first-party games... have really, really done well at that, in my opinion.
Also, my hands are a lot bigger now. I was holding cards in there the other day. I was like, whoa, these things are tiny.
They're small.
But no, I think another sort of more evidence to that, right, is like Pokemon Go. Here you had people who had either moved on or thought they had moved on from Nintendo, and even video games in general, and Pokemon Go comes out and it's on their phones. They're like, I guess I got to play it.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great segue into the next thing I was going to talk about. One thing Nintendo has really done well is they've brought in the casual gamer into the video game world. We talk about how successful Nintendo was in 2020, but look back at the big releases for them last year. Animal Crossing was huge, but that's definitely not a game advertised to hardcore gamers. Maybe hardcore fans of the franchise, but not like hardcore gamers. And most of the games that actually, if you look at the lineup were released last year, were ports, or just remakes of stuff like Mario 3D All-Stars. Pikmin 3 was actually a Wii U port. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon was also a DS port to the Switch. Mm-hmm. I mean, all of these, this is the big hit lineup that Nintendo had last year that got them all of the success. And what it is doing is that now a lot of people have a Switch in their hand because, of course, they've been selling like hotcakes. And so they want to get all of their old games that they missed. Hey, you didn't have a Wii U. Pikmin 3 was on the Wii U. We're going to port that over. Super Mario World 3D was also on the Wii U. We're going to port that over so that you can experience these things for the first time. Kev, you're one of those gamers. You're one of those people that bought a Switch this year and dove into all of those content and started playing Breath of the Wild for the first time. Yeah. So Netflix does cater a lot to the casual gamer. But my question is it at the detriment of the longtime fan? Jake, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think so because, like you said, a lot of people have been able to jump in, and my girlfriend Jessica watches the show sometimes. She's definitely one of those that just got a Switch. She got a Switch Lite not too long ago, right around actually about a year ago, because it was around the time right before the pandemic had really broken off. She got one because of Animal Crossing that was coming up because she had played Animal Crossing when she was younger. And so Nintendo does a great job. Like after she got bored with Animal Crossing recently, she just destroyed Pikmin 3. She ran through that shit and like loved it, right? And so it's just one of those where like Nintendo can really get the casual gamers' attention, and they can come in because Jessica doesn't really game any other time. Like she'll get addicted to something like Pikmin 3 every now and then, but then after she beats that, she'll go a little while without gaming again. And so and then something else will catch her attention, she'll pick it up. It's usually a Nintendo game. But at the same time, I was first in line to get a Switch when they came out. Like I got, one of like the first launch, kind of editions or whatever. Like mine's pretty big, a bulky guy. And like, I know they're talking, the dock's fucking huge too. And so anyway, because they've made slimmer docks now, third party anyway. But it's just one of those where like it never really like turned me off, and I can still play Pikmin and enjoy it too, the same way that Jessica does, even though she's more of a casual gamer, because it has not just the nostalgia factor, but they also just continue to make good games. Like I don't know, like that's one of the biggest things why they keep a casual gamer, but then also lifetime fans, is because they continue to innovate on characters that we grew up with, right? Like these are the same characters, but now they're doing new things. But then also they can captivate a whole new audience that may have even just heard about these characters offhand. Maybe they played it as a kid, but then kind of forgot about gaming, or just didn't really get into it during their more teen years. And so it's incredible, really, what Nintendo's able to do on that front.
Yeah. What about you, Kev? What do you think? Does Nintendo, it caters to the casual gamer a lot, but is it at the detriment of the longtime fan?
I don't think so, because I think that's what they've always been, right? Like Mario's been on every system, Zelda's been on every system, and they've had like, for the most part, majority of their characters have been on every system in one capacity or another, either on their standalone games or in Smash Bros. Or in some other iteration in which they're sort of introduced. So I think this is always just who Nintendo's been, and I don't. It's hard to say, because if you are a longtime fan, then like this is just who Nintendo is, right? It's not like, and for the longtime fans, I think what they try to do, I guess, to sort of balance that or to sort of cater to that, is they'll introduce something new like Splatoon or something like that along the way, where they're keeping their core base, and their core base is the casual gamers. Like they know who they are. And then to make sure that they don't lose those who've been there since day one, they try to give them something new.
Yeah. I think Breath of the Wild is such a good example
of
that, where like someone, and anybody watching this right now, if you've never played Breath of the Wild, this is not sponsored. I'm just telling you, it's a good game. And I think anybody can pick it up, play it, and have a good time. Your casual gamer can get into it, play it. I would even say beat that game, and not not feel like too like discouraged at any time, because while there may be some tough parts, like the real hard shit is only going to be for the extreme collector guys. People who are trying to get all the Korok seeds. People who are trying to max out all of their armor. Get all the armor.
Right,
or speedrunners, right?
Yeah.
And so it's one of those where Breath of the Wild is such a good game that kind of like encompasses what Nintendo, is now anyway. Where like I think a casual gamer can pick it up and have a great time with it. I think it's a beautiful game, but not feel too like they're not going to feel too pretentious with the graphics, right? Because it's still got that kind of shell-shaded look. It's not like trying to push, fucking 4K. Right. You know what I mean? And so like,
it's not going to overheat your PC.
Exactly. It's not going to overheat your PC like Cyberpunk. Right. And so they like, anybody can pick it up and enjoy it and have a good time cooking. Or do whatever you want to do in Breath of the Wild. Whereas, like us, like, I say us, but, your more hardcore kind of lifelong fans are going like, hell yeah, open world, like Zelda game. Like, what all can I do? Let's test these physics. Can I hit this rock and then ride it on top of this thing and then beat Ganon with a wooden sword? Like, what can I do here?
And that's what I need from Nintendo, right? Like, that's that balance. I have that other side with Xbox or whatever, like Sony or PC, right? Like, Nintendo's sort of that breath of fresh air that I'm not going to get anywhere else. And that's
so different. I love it.
I agree. I think that I agree with both of y'all, too. I think that Nintendo has a good way of balancing out that. I think Pokemon's also a great example of this. I can run through Pokemon pretty quickly, especially, playing competitively and knowing what I know. But the real fun of Pokemon has always been in the post game and competing with other players, building teams, doing things like that, because that's just where the fun of that game is, and creating a Pokemon team and enjoying the Pokemon universe, becoming a Pokemon master, if you will. And so there is that level of, this is where the casual gamer's at, and this is where the competitive gamer's at, and it's a great thing. When I want to connect with little kids that play Pokemon, I can talk about how they play Pokemon, but like, of course, when I open their game, they've got like, a level 60 Cinderace and like 5 Rookies. But like I can still connect, and that person that player.
And then,
yes.
and then he goes, I've touched your children, and your children have touched me too. And the parents are like, what? No, I'm just...
No, I don't. That's not the thing I do. No.
Dark turn.
Dark turn.
I've touched your children.
I
just always, that's one of my favorite scenes. That's one of my favorite scenes in fucking what is it? School of Rock. Yeah, with Jack Black. Whatever. He's like, I've touched your children. And they've touched me too. And they're all like, Jesus Christ. And he's like, no, I mean like with music. And like,
yeah, but I think that it still has that aspect that appeals to. I know tons of people that are hardcore gamers that did play Animal Crossing. Even though I use that example because they wanted
Animal Crossing.
Because they wanted to get away from it. I know that there was, even though that there are casual, like that Animal Crossing is a game for casual players. I still know that there was podcasts that existed on Animal Crossing, on like how to get these right villagers in your village and things like that. So it's people taking at least a hardcore gaming approach to a casual game. And so I think that Nintendo has that unique spot where there are hardcore gamers that love the casual games that Nintendo puts out, and will casually compete in them in the most hardcore ways. We talk about the casual gamer, of course, but the competitive community, of course, has been in the headlines as well, right? All games like Smash and Pokemon and Splatoon all have an intensely dedicated fan base of hardcore players. All of them have also faced challenges from Nintendo directly. From banning modified versions of Melees from being used in competitions, canceling live streams for Splatoon that show solidarity with other players, victim blaming and sexual assault claims, and refusing to implement features that would allow for online play to prosper in a pandemic. They have faced a lot of scrutiny over the past several months. What can Nintendo do to fix their relationship with the competitive community, Kevin? Or should these nerds just shut up and turn on items and have fun?
Well, you certainly shouldn't victim blame sexual harassment claims.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that we'll just go ahead and get that out the way. But for the other stuff, I think you have to listen to your community, especially in this space, right? Like your comp players are the ones that drive this industry, so to speak. And if they're not happy, then they're more likely going to go somewhere else, or find some other outlet or workaround to make sure that you're not necessary anymore. I think that's always necessary, and I think this is somewhere where Nintendo has kind of failed, right? It's been kind of like cute, if you will, in a way where it's like they listen, like for instance, not putting Waluigi in Smash, but putting fucking Minecraft Steve in there. Like we know what you're doing.
Dude, I know what they do.
Yeah, but like when it comes to stuff like this, at some point,
gets in there before.
Yeah.
Waluigi.
But he's still a trophy. But at some point, you still you have to draw the line and then realize that your community does matter, especially if they're the one, especially in this space and arena, right? Like it's not like this is happening without Nintendo's consent. They're sponsoring these community activities, these competitive atmospheres, in these competitions. Sometimes they are. Sometimes.
And then sometimes they pull the plug incidentally at the last minute.
Yeah, sometimes, but for the most part, for some communities, they are, and I think they have to try to do their part to keep those alive. And this is the thing that sort of separates Nintendo from Sony and Xbox and PC, is that Sony and Xbox and PC have completely they're all in on esports and competitive gaming, where Nintendo's kind of like they're dipping their toe, they're not really sure. They're just kind of on the fence. They're like, it's like, what are we, right? Like, are we? They don't know what this relationship is.
I think Nintendo is almost afraid to get too hardcore with their competitive fans, because it's one of those where, like, if they start to enable it too much, then Nintendo starts to be, like almost looked at as like, Smash tournaments. And Smash is one of those games that Nintendo makes purposefully that can be played by, two kids that just want to have fun, or two grown ass, people who know like all kinds of crazy movements. Who need to settle some shit. Yeah. And so like, Smash is just one of those games that's just one example of a lot of Nintendo games where they can be enjoyed by both a hardcore fan and a competitive and a casual fan. Kind of like, Breath of the Wild, all the stuff that I was talking about earlier. But, like, at the same time, like, Nintendo doesn't really want to almost put too much clout behind the competitive aspects, because I think they don't want too many people to start, going, wait. There's, like, big strategy to Pokemon. I have to, like, know strategy to win it. You know what I mean? And so, like, because then it's going to make people think, like, they have to be a good gamer to play it. Like, I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine that had never played Halo, and it was just they were just like, oh, I just never thought I'd be good at it. I've seen people play it competitively, and I just thought I'd suck. And it's like, well, that's not a good reason not to get into a game. Like, it's just because you watch somebody play it at a competitive level. That's like saying I'll never throw football with my boys because I saw Tom Brady. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't, like, just because TB12's dropping dimes, like, that doesn't mean I got to go out there and do it. Like, we're just having fun.
Yeah.
But anyway, like, I really just think, like, Nintendo hasn't done a great job with their hardcore competitive community, especially in the past, and I don't know if they will, because I think they just kind of want to teeter that line. I don't think they want to get too much into it, because then people will start looking at it as like, I have to be good to play Mario. I just want to play Mario.
Yeah, Disbreeze said this in chat, that Nintendo is really trying to maintain this mindset that video games are meant to be fun and don't have to be competitive.
Yeah,
and I think that is a good point. But with that same thing said, if you're having a Pokemon competition, then you have to listen to the competitive community. My biggest complaint with Nintendo is that they need to listen more. They do a great job of putting out great content, but they've honestly at times laughed at how teams have taken how they like take ideas from other gamers and how they listen to their fan base. They talk about Pokemon and said if we made a Pokemon game the way that fans wanted it to, it would just be Gen 1 over and over again, with a bunch of 7 different forms of Charizard. And there's a part of that I agree with, but there's also a part of that where it's like, one of the biggest things that was at the beginning of 2020, we actually talked about this in one of our first shows, was Nintendo's failure to respond to Pokemon Sword and Shield's competitive community as far as offering a visitor mode, which they had coded in there. They just only had it so that it only worked on LAN. They just had to figure out a way to make it so that it worked through the actual online community, and they still hadn't figured out a way to do it. I don't think that they're ever going to figure out a way to do it. But anyways, it's weird to see that Nintendo hasn't really been able to listen to their fan base in the right way that's made it effective for them to really have the community, the competitive community prosper. Because Nintendo's doing well right now. The competitive community should be doing well too. But obviously, we just highlighted how, honestly, it's been one of the most turbulent years for Nintendo in the competitive scene than any other year.
And that's true too. And I think, like Jake said, I think they'd rather play it safe on this, because what you don't want to do, and this happens often with competitive communities, is when you start listening to everybody, or you start listening to like only like comp players or professional players, and the game becomes unplayable. That's what happened with Fortnite. That's kind of what's happened with Overwatch. So if you go too far in that realm, it's almost hard to come back from it. And I think that's where Nintendo's kind of cautiously approaching it.
Yeah, I think one of the big reasons why I fell off from Fortnite was just because of how, and I mean, this is my own, like, I'll admit it, like, just how good players got at it.
Right.
And almost how good just casual players got at it. Because I would, just get fucking murdered.
Right.
And that's not fun.
And that was the thing, like, and you'd notice it would happen, those changes would happen because they would change, like, there'd be a new meta every week. And that would only happen because players would complain, like, there'd be, like, an item or something that would make building hard, and they'd be like, oh, we can't build the same, so then they'd take it out even though that shit was fun, and then they would just keep doing it to the point where the game's not even fun anymore. And I think that's where Nintendo's kind of like, or they're trying to stay away from, and it's weird because
Nintendo doesn't have too many patches.
Yeah, no, they don't. They never do, and they never have. And that's
think about that.
Like, yeah, this whole new DLC stuff. If you think about it, it's kind of new to Nintendo, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Nintendo usually releases complete games.
Yes, yeah. What you see is what you get. Like there's nothing else happening after that. So.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, Nintendo's whole journey with the competitive community, and I hope they start opening up and listening to them. Well, despite Nintendo fumbling things with the official and unofficial competitive communities, nothing quite beats the competition amongst friends. Am I right? As we've talked about at length about how some of these games have shaped our childhood and honestly continue to shape our adulthood. So this comes the important question, and we'll start with you, Jake. What's the greatest Nintendo console and why?
Oh man. So nostalgia wants me to say the GameCube, but I'm honestly gonna have to say the Switch right now. And I'll tell you why. It's because one, I can take it with me and literally, like, as I'm on a plane, play Breath of the Wild, then go home, dock it, and continue to play that same game.
Yeah.
And it has, it has Smash. It's got Mario Kart. It's got it has Mario Party, but the GameCube Mario Party is Mario Party. Like, I think it's 4 or 3 or something like that on GameCube is when it peaked, and it's one of the most. It's prestige, and so. It's just that, a lot of people will say 64. I'm seeing 64. Yeah. I mean, have you played a 64 lately? Like, honestly, like I'm being dead ass. I have one in there and I play it. I like it. Don't get me wrong, but that controller is a fucking nightmare.
Yes, the controller. The controller is the weirdest controller of all time.
And
Nintendo
the game
was experimenting with controllers there, and there was one just like that's the one like weird member of the family kind of thing, like the one that talks about conspiracy theories at Thanksgiving. That's what the N64 controller is at the family of controllers that is Nintendo controllers.
So look me in the eyes and tell me that they like the Nintendo 64 version of Mario Kart more than the newest version of Mario Kart, right? They're lying. Because, nostalgia maybe feel that, but gaming-wise, the buttons, the turning, the boost, all of the stuff, like, the innovations that have been made and the advancements of the controls are undeniable. And so, I love the Switch. It's my favorite right now. It has so many of your old-school favorites. The fact that they ported a lot of games like Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, Mario Galaxy, the newest Mario Odyssey was phenomenal. Breath of the Wild's phenomenal. If they would port some old Zelda games, if I could get Majora's Mask on there, or fucking Ocarina of Time, that would be some bangers.
As Disbreeze was saying in the chat, emulator games for N64 are better than actually playing it on the N64, and I have to agree with that.
I agree. And that was going to be my answer, kind of, Jake. Like, my nostalgia purposes, yes, the N64, but I'd say Switch because some of my favorite games on N64 I can play on the Switch. Hopefully,
with new controls.
Yes, with new controls. Because, and like you said, dude, when that game came out, mind you, I'm like 9 years old. I was holding the controller like this, and I had little hands. I'm like, how do I reach the joystick? Like, it never occurred to me to grab the middle dongle, if you will, whatever what the fuck they call. Like, yes, looking at it, it looks cool, right? You're like, fuck, this thing looks like a fucking fighter jet. Like, it looks
if you had
like
3 hands, it'd be fucking cool. But like, if you had little tiny mandibles that came out and just grab the little part of the controller and work the stick,
I still remember somebody in my childhood would play the game like this. Like, they'd hold the right hand like you're supposed to, and then they'd hold like the thumbstick like this. With
God, dude.
No one knew how to use it, and it wasn't until like a year or 2 years after the console was on its way out that I finally figured it out. And you didn't have Google or YouTube back then, so you're just like trying to figure out how to work this shit.
Right,
exactly.
So for me, I think that the greatest console. One of the greatest consoles for me, though, I think when you talk about when Nintendo peaked, for me, I think that was playing Twilight Princess on the Wii. Honestly, I know that seems like an odd one, but like that was the only one that I felt that they actually utilized motion control in a way that actually worked with the game, and actually felt like it really. It flowed well, and I felt like I was actually, for the first time ever, playing a Legend of Zelda game where I could swing my sword, I could pull up my shield, and fight back against the people, and I could remember actually and fighting back and actually feeling more immersed in the game because of what I was doing for the first time ever. And I think that was an absolutely amazing experience. I think that compounded with Skyward Sword as well. And so some of the best Legend of Zelda games coming out of there, I think, were some of my favorites in that generation. So, and the Wii is one of the greatest selling consoles of all time. What it did for gaming, in my opinion, I think really did push the envelope and really did was very substantial. I think the N64 gets the nostalgia factor, but I do think I have to give it to the Wii. I absolutely love the Wii, and I played the shit out of the Wii. And you can still use the GameCube controller.
That's true. And you don't have a Nintendo Switch without without the Wii. Like that, I think you're right there.
Oh yeah.
And that's the thing too. I think the Wii came out. It's weird. It sold so many consoles, but I don't think it's talked about. I don't think it's talked enough in terms of like IP, because it came out during the Xbox 360 and PS3 days, right?
It came out when the console wars, but everybody thought that war was just Sony and Xbox, right? Because they put Nintendo, they were like, oh, they got this Wii thing with motion shit. They're not the same.
I think that kind of was the step where it became, because when you had before, you had GameCube, Xbox, and PlayStation 2, right? Which were all like kind of the same kind of game console, at least in comparison when you throw the Wii in there, right? Wii is a completely different kind of console that was in there. And so I think when we talk about when it became the fight between Sony and Microsoft for that hardcore gamer spot, I think it was the Wii that did that. But I think and so although all the hardcore gamers are like, okay, well, these are the only two we're focusing on, the Wii outsold them by like 20-fold.
Yeah,
and
capitalism talks.
It brought video gaming into the mainstream. So
they also, and that's what I was alluding to. Where a lot of that was large part into like they were going outside of sort of this market audience of gamers, right? Like they were getting your aunt, your mom, right? And I think that sort of helped drive the console sales. I think, for instance, I had a Wii, but the only game I actually bought, I think, was Super Smash Bros. Like that was the whole purpose I bought for the Wii. And I also had like some of the older games on the Wii too, right? Like, but I feel like I missed out a lot because there's a lot of great titles that came out on the Wii. I was just kind of, my time and attention at the time was taken away by my Xbox 360.
That was what was really dope about the Wii. If you knew the right nerd who could unlock that bad boy for you, like Jessica's brother was smart enough to know how to get, like, he had basically like every GameCube game ported onto that thing. I don't know how. He through like, and so like he essentially had a jailbroken Wii, and that bad boy had a full discography, and playing some of those games was really fun, and the motion controls really set the tone for what became the Switch. And so that's a good pick, Dodd. That's a good pick. I still got to go with the Switch because like of how many hours. I think I've put close to as many hours on my Switch as I did my N64 in my childhood, which has got to be impressive. But it's just because I played the shit out of Breath of the Wild.
I know. And the Switch for me again, it's that, like Jake said, that versatility where it's like I'm playing this on the plane and now I'm playing picked up where I left off on my television.
Yeah.
So convenient.
Last question before we go into the top Zen. And this leads into the top Zen.
Yeah.
What is the greatest Nintendo IP? What is the greatest Nintendo franchise out there? Like, if any of them, you don't have to pick which character, right? You don't have to pick which one, but which. If you got to pick one franchise to go with, what's the greatest? What's the GOAT?
It's got to be Mario,
right?
Yeah, it's got to be Mario. There's only one of them that has a whole, physical land you can go to right now dedicated to it, and that's Mario.
I mean, I would argue Pokemon brought handheld gaming into the forefront. I mean, of course, you're gonna know I'm gonna pick Pokemon, right? But Pokemon gaming is what made Nintendo this handheld giant on gaming, and actually helped shape the Switch, and
Monsters.
is the highest grossing entertainment franchise of all time, beating out fucking Disney because it sells so much in video games. So like that to me, I think you could have an argument for a case there, and then arguably Legend of Zelda has some of the greatest games of all time. Ocarina of Time is one of the greatest games of all time. Wind Waker's also, and Breath of the Wild.
And that's the thing too. Like for me, it's like Mario is always going to be there, and it's kind of Mario carried Nintendo to where it is, but I think Pokemon expanded that, and Zelda is just like Zelda solidifies its sort of its reputation and credentials in terms of quality games.
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it. But I just, if you're asking me what's the most
greatest
important, it's a me, a Mario. Like,
Yeah.
Mario was
his character
Jake.
base. Think about it.
Yeah.
Like, you got to think, if you're playing Smash, like 1/4 of the characters came from Mario.
right.
That's true. Yeah.
Like, I mean,
The
well
term
now,
super
and also
came from
about,
Mario.
and also another fourth came from Pokemon, I guess. So good pick, Doc.
Right. For real. All right, well, that will take us right into our top